Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about the 3 best reptiles that you can keep as pets at home. Those 3 are going to be ranked on availability, handleability, and just their general overall care. I'm recording this mid-editing. I just want everybody to know I am not a herpetologist, and this video is literally gotten cut into 103 clips because I don't know how to quit saying So I just did it right there. All right, thanks. Now, first on that list, in my personal opinion, is going to be the bearded dragon. Now, the bearded dragon is a really, really good pet just because of how cheap they are to get. They're really easy to get your hands on. Their care is a little bit more expensive than some of the other reptiles, but they're really, really good about being handled. And they're really, really good with kids, too. With any animal, just like reptiles or dogs or cats, it's always a good idea to supervise your kids whenever they are handling your reptiles, because you never know what could happen. Now, bearded dragons have probably the widest availability that you can get of pretty much any other reptile because they are so popular in the United States. Every single pet store that you come across is going to have 10 or 15 bearded dragons inside. But I personally will always recommend going to a breeder instead of a big box pet store. Whenever you go to those breeders instead of the pet store, you're helping better breeding practices when it comes to breeding these animals and taking care of these animals. Now, bearded dragons, you're going to be able to get basic ones for $30. Now, some morphs are going to cost you up into probably a couple thousand. Now, with that being said, I'm going to say that the bearded dragon is going to get a 10 out of 10 on the availability chart just because you can get them anywhere. Any reptile expo you go to, any pet store you go to, any breeder you talk to, you're going to be able to get a bearded dragon from. Now, on the handleability side of things, I would say that bearded dragons are probably going to score pretty high as well because they like to get handled and they're extremely quick to adapt to people and being inside of their enclosure. They're not really going to have a lot of issues with being held and climbing on you and just running around and just being out in the environment with you. They're extremely social. They don't mind lots of noise. So they're not going to be one of those pets where you take a step too loud and they're going to jump and run and hide. Bearded dragons are super, super calm when it comes to stuff like that. If you have more of a loud house, a bearded dragon is going to be really, really good for you. So for handleability, I'm going to say they get another 9 out of 10. Now, moving on to care for the bearded dragons. The bearded dragons do require just a little bit more care because they have to have more expensive equipment to keep them completely healthy. Bearded dragons require quite a large amount of UVB light. It's going to be one of these right here. No one is going to recommend one of these to you. These just do not provide enough UVB for the bearded dragon to stay happy and healthy. Most people are going to tell you that you need a linear or tubular UVB light, and that basically just prevents them from getting metabolic bone disease, and they're going to have that overlapping with their basking light. That's another thing with bearded dragons is that they have to have a pretty warm basking temperature. Some places recommend up to 105 degrees for some bearded dragons. That requires a 75 to 100 watt bulb to be able to achieve those in an enclosure that's properly sized for a bearded dragon. The appropriate sized enclosure is going to be a 4x2x2, which is, I'm pretty sure, equals out to about 120 gallons. And their food, you can get food out of a jar for them. You can make your own food for them. So for care, just because of the UVB light, that's going to be a little bit expensive, and you do have to feed them every day. I'm going to say that a bearded dragon gets a 7 out of 10 on the care scale. Overall, bearded dragon is a pretty good pet, so I'm going to give them I think that averages out to like 8.5. So they're going to get an average of 8.5 on the pet scale. Now, next on that list of pets is going to be this little guy right here. This is a Halmahera blue-tongued skink. His name is Mushu. Now, for availability, these are a little bit harder to get your hands on. I wouldn't say they're more difficult. I'm just going to say they're more expensive. This one right here was about $300, and adult ones can be $400 plus, and this is just for basic morphs. Some of the morphs for these can go up into thousands, like the albino ones, or a little bit more difficult to come across when it comes to getting them because they do have to come from Indonesia or wherever, and not a lot of people breed these, and they're just a little bit more costly when it comes to just buying them the upfront cost. Now for handleability, I'm going to give them a little bit of a lower score. They're not really the biggest fan of you picking them up and playing with them and stuff like this. Like right now, he's kind of huffing, and he hasn't really moved a whole bunch, so they're not really good for people that are going to want something they can play with, because he's just going to want to sit. He's not going to want to do very much, And even inside of his enclosure, that's what he's going to do most of the time. He's just going to hide and eat, and that's just really all they do. They're not really play pets. I mean, they'll walk around for you and stuff like that, but they're not like a bearded dragon. So this is going to be more of a pet for somebody that's going to want to, look at it and not bother it as much. But they're not really going to bite at you or anything like that. So I mean, that's really not anything to worry about, but they're just not as keen to being picked up and played with. So that's something to keep in mind when it comes to selecting your pet. I'm going to give the availability and the handleability about the same score for these. I'm going to give them a 6, just because, they are a little bit more expensive and they're not really the biggest fans of being played with or held. Now the care for these is a little bit easier than a bearded dragon. Now some people do recommend a UVB, some people don't. I personally do use a UVB light for Mushu. Their basking temperature doesn't have to be as high, but their just overall temperature needs to be about 75 to 80 degrees, and then that drops out at nighttime like everything else does. They don't have to have the low humidity like bearded dragons do. These have to have relatively high humidity. Some of these different species of these can have humidity needs up to 90%. And it also really is important to know where you got your blue-tongued skink from. The ones from Australia, they're going to need higher temperatures and less humidity compared to the ones that are from Indonesia. The ones from Indonesia are going to need a little bit lower temperatures but quite a bit higher humidity. Now their food is a little bit harder to get. Lots of pet stores are starting to kind of push it out and not keep it in stock. So it's something that you're going to have to order. And that's if you're not feeding it, the leafy greens similar to the bearded dragon, and protein like the mealworms and the superworms, stuff like that. So for care, I'm going to give them about a 7 out of 10 because they're not that bad to take care of. They're relatively easy. So overall, he's going to get a 6.5 out of 10. Now the last pet that I'm going to put on this list is going to be a ball python. I just put that one on there for kind of, some people don't want a lizard, some people want a snake. And a ball python is going to be one of the easiest snakes to take care of just because of, how often you feed them and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be on the same scale of availability, handleability, and care. Now for the availability of the ball pythons, if you go to an expo, like a reptile expo, like a Repticon or a reptile show, 70% of the pets that are for sale there are going to be ball pythons. Some of them are going to be, this $50 ball python that's just plain Jane, and one of them might be this $2,500 ball python that's got all these fancy designs and crazy colors on it. But you can get them absolutely anywhere. They're just as common as the bearded dragons are, and that's just because of how easy they are to take care of, and they're really not that bad. Now for handleability, I don't want to say that they're bad to handle because they're really not. They're not going to strike at you all the time. They're not going to be crazy. It's not like you're picking up a rattlesnake. Ball pythons are quite a bit more docile than most other snakes are going to be. They're not going to bite you unless they think that they can eat you or you've just really pissed them off. The only bad thing about them is whenever you feed them, they eat. Whenever they're younger, they eat every 7 days. I personally recommend is after you feed your snake and you put it back in its enclosure and you let it do its own thing, we don't mess with ours for 2 days because there's always that risk of them regurgitating their food. The more that you can minimize that risk, the better off it's going to be for your pet and the safer it's going to be for your pet. They're just not a pet that's going to be getting handled all the time just because of how often that you have to feed it, and it has to have that break because it goes through a certain process to break down that entire mouse inside of its body. So for handleability, it's going to get let's say a 6 just because of how often you have to give it break. And for availability, it's going to get probably a 10 out of 10 like the bearded dragon did because they are so common. Care is not anywhere near as big of a deal for these as it is, some other stuff. Ball pythons are super easy to take care of. Their temperatures aren't crazy. Their humidity isn't crazy. Their humidity is important because you need to keep that humidity steady. I believe it's like right at 70%. I'm not 100% for sure of that, but I'm pretty sure it's right around 70%. Because their sheds need to come off easy. If their sheds don't come off easy, they can get caps stuck on their eyes to where they can't see, and that'll cause them to be lethargic, and that will cause them to strike. They don't have to have lots of crazy lighting. They don't have to have, crazy temperatures. So I'm going to say a ball python is probably going to be the easiest snake to keep if that's what you're wanting is a snake. So for care, I'm going to give the ball python an 8.5 out of 10. Oh, please note, I just noticed that I'm not doing the actual math on these to average out the numbers. So I'm just going to give the ball python I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 on the ease of care or ease of keeping and, you know, just overall as a pet. I'm going to say the bearded dragon is going to be the best for most people if you want a more active pet that you can play with. The blue-tongued skink is going to be one that's a little bit better to look at. You know, you can play with them, but not too much. And then the snake, as I'm going to say, it's going to be one that, you know, you're just going to, it's going to come out and it's just going to hang out. It's not really going to play. Or you're just going to lay down and sit down. It's going to sit on your chest or wrap around your arm or something like that. Keep in mind that whenever you're looking at getting a pet, it really boils down to what you're looking for in each individual pet. So there's a perfect pet for everybody out there, but you just have to do your research and make sure you know how to take care of that animal before you bring it home. I think that's going to be all for this video. Leave a thumbs up and please subscribe so I can keep making videos like this. And hopefully I can get more little critters like Mushu to show you guys in the future. Thank you.